welcome to today's WIEF I Empower on Women and ESG, Optimizing Business Value. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me first introduce our moderator for today, Samina Akram. She is the managing partner at Samak Ethical Finance Limited in the United Kingdom. She specializes in the field of Islamic and ethical finance. Now, please welcome Samina Akram.
Thank you so much. Well, assalamu alaikum, very good morning from London. I'd like to begin by thanking the World Islamic Economic Forum for inviting me to moderate this session focused on women and ESG optimizing business value. It gives me great pleasure to introduce three industry experts for our session. We are joined by Farida Al-Gami, who is the General Manager at Thawarat Family Business Forum, which is based in the UAE. We are joined by Dr. Rizki, who is the CEO and co-founder of Impact, which is based in Indonesia. And we are joined by Ada Ramli, who is the Head of Strategy at Petronas, which is based in Malaysia. Now, I'd like to open the floor, if I may, and I'd like to ask my first question to Ada. Now, Ada, how important is gender diversity and women empowerment in driving sustainable business practices? And what evidence or research supports this connection? Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon from Malaysia. Thank you, Samina, for inviting me to this forum and WIEF. And thank you also for the question about gender diversity and its importance in driving sustainability business practices. Yeah. So gender diversity and women empowerment are actually crucial in driving sustainable business practices and, of course, in optimizing business values, especially from my experience in the oil and gas industry, just like any other sectors. Yeah, there are growing evidence and research that highlights the positive impact of gender diversity on various aspects of business performance within the industry. From a diverse perspective and innovation, gender diversity brings a broader range of perspective and experience to decision-making processes, leading to more innovative solutions. Research that was done by McKinsey and Company in their report called Delivering Through Diversity found that companies with more gender diverse executive teams are likely to have 21% likely to outperform from their industry peers in terms of profitability. Yeah? This is a research done by McKinsey. So there were some evidence on how a diverse leadership has contributed to the bottom line of a company. In terms of talent attraction and retention, a company that emphasizes gender diversity and women empowerment can help attract and retain top talent. Young professionals nowadays has increasingly shown how they value diversity and are more likely to choose employers committed to inclusion. This is also evident in the survey that was done by Deloitte. About 83% of millennial respondents believe that a diverse workforce was essential for driving innovation. I think that's to summarize some of the evidence that we have seen in the industry, especially in corporate world, where diversity and inclusion, especially in empowering women, has contributed directly into the profitability of an organization. Over to you, Samina.
Thank you. And can you perhaps provide some examples of companies that have successfully empowered women to enhance their sustainability efforts? What were the key strategies they employed?
Okay, I can share some examples from the oil and gas industry. We can talk about Royal Dutch Shell, which I think everybody here knows them as Shell. So Shell has been proactive in promoting gender diversity and women's empowerment. One of its key strategies is establishing employee resource group that focus on supporting women in workplace and providing networking and mentoring opportunities amongst these women. Shell also invest in programs aimed at developing female leaders and offer flexible work arrangements to promote work-life balance. I come from Petronas, so Petronas is also going very big in supporting women's leadership in the organization. We also have a movement called the Petronas Leading Women Network, where women and also men help each other in supporting the leadership growth of the female community. There are other companies in the oil and gas industries like Chevron, Total, BP, and Equinor. They are all very supportive of inclusion of women in their leadership. You will see, if you go through their website, you will see the top leadership of these companies are also very diverse, with at least 20 to 30% inclusion of women. And oil and gas is generally a very masculine community, industry. Traditionally, engineers are all men, and I think before this, those engineers who are tasked to work at an oil rig in a platform across the sea are generally men, because the facilities there are also not divided between female and male. But now I think the industry has changed significantly. In Petronas, there are so many engineers, young engineers who are ladies working in the oil rig, working in the desert, and the whole company is moving towards making sure facilities that we have in all of our sites are inclusive of women. Over to you, Samina.
Thank you. If I can stay with you, Adia, in your experience, what specific roles or areas within companies can women contribute most effectively to enhance sustainability practices?
Actually, that's a very interesting question. In my opinion and in my experience, women should not be, differentiated from men in terms of what roles we can perform better. We should be treated the same as men based on meritocracy, and women right now in the industry are very experienced, and you have women experience in very vast area of expertise. So in my opinion, there is no specific real career that is solely tagged to a woman. It's actually open to all. However, from a biological perspective of a woman being very maternal, being very alert and very sensitive with high empathy, there are roles that are generally associated closer to women, like in pursuing sustainability and corporate social responsibility. People tend to put more women in research and development because women are perceived to be more meticulous sometimes. And then, in supply chain management, planning and performance, because women are used to tracking stuff at home, I guess. And generally being alert and being with very high empathy to our surrounding, women communicate and market things better. So those are the general aspect. But across the industry, you will see more women in roles like finance, HR. But I think where we're moving towards and how the industry is going into the future, this is no longer the stereotype that organizations wants to live with. It's very diverse and very open right now. That's my view, Samina.
Yeah, good. Some very optimistic points made there. But what challenges do you think that women face in the corporate world, particularly when it comes to leading sustainability initiatives, and how can these challenges be overcome?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the gender biasness and stereotypes that has been there, the stigma that has been there for all of these years and decades that we have been operating is still there. The stereotypes of certain roles are more apt for male and not female. For example, if I were to hire a driver to drive lorries to transport my fuel from from the terminal to the station, maybe I would be more inclined to have male. Generally, organizations are more inclined because it's very strenuous. So those are some of the stereotypes that we see in our industry, but that has been challenged because there has been many opportunities given to female also in doing this kind of jobs, and they have flourished well in these areas. There is also a general issue of or challenges of work-life balance. Typically women have to juggle between managing home and also managing work. So having good infrastructure in the workplace, where some companies actually have provided daycare for the children within the same building, that promotes the balance that is looked forward to by all of these women, and also the ability to be flexible in managing work time. For example, if a woman is allowed to actually come in a bit later during the day, so that they can actually manage, the transportation and logistics of the children before they get to work. That would be awesome. And then, they're allowed to actually manage the picking up of the kids from school and all that, while maintaining the delivery and results of their tasks. That would be very, very encouraged. Because at the end of the day, generally women are typical multitaskers. They are able to actually perform if empowerment and trust is given to them to manage their daily schedule for as long as the result is shown at the end of the day. So being a bit more trust nurturing as an organization is also a good strategy in inculcating women and diversity in the leadership of an organization. The other perspective is, I think one of the biggest challenge that I see where I'm coming from is networking and access to opportunities. It's very common for people to actually get through their career growth through informal networks and connections, because that is what sets you aside, right? When you spend a bit more time on a more social environment with leaders, you will get recognized better. And these are challenges that is very real for women, because typically they're only able to actually spend time during the formal working hours, and then they have to go back because there are other responsibilities that awaits them. So in this instances, one of the key strategies to handle this would be to actually create support group that allocates certain time during the informal working hours for these women to actually network without taking time out from the official working hours, from the formal period that they are asked to work, so that network can still be achieved. And networking and access to opportunities should be part of a formal performance indicators that women should be set aside to do.
I think some really interesting points made, especially in regards to work-life balance. I think this current crisis has probably, really helped women in the sense that more companies are okay now with women working from home. So I think it's definitely challenged, our kind of attitude towards work-life balance. So thank you for that. And my final question: how do gender-inclusive leadership and decision-making impact the long-term sustainability and overall success of the company?
Okay, gender inclusive leadership and decision-making can have very significant impact on the long-term sustainability and overall success of the company. Gender inclusive leadership brings together people from different backgrounds, different experience, and different viewpoints. And this diversity of perspective fosters creativity, innovation, and leading to better problem solving and decision making. And when a diverse group of individuals is involved in shaping strategies and making decisions, they are more likely to identify a wider range of opportunities and risk. This will also enhance creativity and innovation, which will propel a company into realms that are not traditional, especially in pursuing growth in areas that are new. I think in the current situation, day and age, and right after COVID and all that, many companies are actually looking at moving towards a totally different direction from their traditional businesses. So, having women with a different perspective, different background creates a better platform for these companies to shape strategies that are more inclusive and diverse.
Thank you so much, Ada. Some really interesting points made there. If I can now turn to Dr. Rizki. I've had the pleasure of joining quite a few webinars with Dr. Rizki, so it's good to see you again. If you can turn your video on, I don't think we can see you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Hi, Assalamualaikum. Hi, Samina. Nice to meet you again.
And you. So if I can start off by asking you, how do you see the interplay of ESG, SDG, sustainability, and women empowerment at large?
Okay, thanks very much indeed. First of all, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good afternoon from Jakarta. Samina, thank you once again. Nice to meet you. Last time we met in London, yeah? so well, yeah. Well, that was a very intriguing question. SDGs itself, we have 17 goals and 163 cascaded goals to be achieved in 2030. It means in the near future, SDGs will be some kind of obsolete, right? We need to transform into the new era. And plus, we have just recently recovered from the cataclysmic pandemics globally, right? So before the pandemics, before the calamity, we used to have a set of culture, a set of values, a set of global trade, and a set of guidance, right? Now, after the pandemic is done in 2022, in the next 2 decades, in the next 20 years ahead, now this lies the essence of the SDGs. The essence of the ESG itself. It is forward-looking. So what will happen? It will be very drastically changed. The set of social culture, the set of economic well-being will never be entirely the same again with what we used to have in the last moments before COVID-19. Right. So now the children at 6 years old today will be a manager by that time. The 10 years old teenager today might become a junior professor or a CEO 2 decades from now. And what set of culture that they will bear at that time? The culture of COVID survival. So in this instance, I deeply respect women, because women will play the very important bridge. And this is so much an honor for me itself as the only male here in this very Zoom meeting.
Great.
It is so much an honor to talk about women empowerment. So much an honor once again to have me. Thank you very much indeed. And so I believe there will be a missing link between the set of culture, the set of norms, the set of socioeconomic conducts before COVID-19 and after COVID-19. Who can bridge this missing link? I believe that should come from women, and this is how I can understand. I'm not an Islamic philosopher. That in Islamic teaching, Surah An-Nisa, verse 9, if I'm not mistaken, there is a guidance to prepare the next generation, the strong generation. I believe this is a universal value. I totally agree with this. We need to prepare the next generation to be fit into their time. Every time has their time. Everyone has their time, and every time has people inside. So women can be playing very important bridge in this matter. So can you see now 45% of newly appointed board of Fortune 500 companies are women last year. So that means nearly a half of the total net worth of United States dollars of 22.6 billion globally has been contributed by women. Can you see the tremendous impact from this? Because all of these companies, they run nearly about 30 million workers. They empower 30 million workers at least. worldwide. So can you see the potential of dramatic change can start from here, right? Not to mention that women can lead the good corporate governance, can lead corporate communications, can provide good communication climate internally, externally, right? In Harvard Business Review, I even read about the warmth competence that has been lacking nowadays. There naturally we have femininity and masculinity. Naturally, women are feminine, men are masculine. But nowadays, in the next 2 decades, the moment will be very wild. Women can learn about masculinity, and men can also and should also learn about wisdom, about femininity. And from where can we get the wisdom? That will be the best coming from women, I suppose. So wisdom in business expansion, wisdom in balancing how to pull the throttle and how to also press the brake is extremely needed in the next 2 decades at least, because we cannot barely make some business plans without wisdom. Okay, I want to play in this arena. I want to tap into this new business. I want to expand into this new territory without wise calculation behind, right? So corporate planning, I agree with Aida. Corporate planning will be best to be done by having the wisdom, finding the eternal balance in terms of ESG, and that lies in women empowerment itself. So I think that will be the major interplay between the ESG and then the SDGs and women empowerment at large. Not to mention about the SMEs, right? The power of the small medium enterprises that capture the majority of the economics, majority of the socio-economic well-beings, be it in Indonesia or even globally. It was the SMEs who are resilient during COVID-19, and that was a strong evidence for me. The majority of the SMEs are run by women, if I can't say all of them, at least nearly at least a half or in the significant amount of the contribution of SMEs are run by the women. I think this will be a great wisdom and lesson to learn for us as a baseline to mitigate, to anticipate the upcoming 20 years ahead, because we can see the symptoms nowadays. We have been losing empathy. We have been losing the sense of togetherness. And we learned again about, yes, we are in this together during the pandemics, and that's what made us strong, right? And that kind of wisdom can be best to be transferred generationally with women at the backbone. So that's my take on that, Samina.
That's really fascinating insight. I'd be quite keen to understand more generally just what's happening within the ESG space in Indonesia. So how are companies adopting ESG principles in Indonesia?
Oh yeah, in Indonesia, well, we have the ESG scores here. Now, let me be a little bit more academic because I'm now live from the University of Islam International Indonesia. So the data that I have here, that we have here, also in our discussion at Impact internally. Now our score of ESG, if I may refer to the last research in 2022, we got the score the 69.2, and that's with reference from Cambridge University as well. So that was slightly above the world's average with the score of 66. So I can't say Indonesia as a beginner, but I can't also say Indonesia is in the advanced player for the ESG itself. But let me allow me to pinpoint the SMEs back to the discussion about SMEs itself. It is tremendous for me, I see. So the SMEs capture 90% of the total investment. in this country, in Indonesia. Indonesia still remains about the fourth largest economy in the world right now. With that said, 64 million of SMEs capture 90% of the total investment. And out of those 64 million SMEs, the 37 million are run by women. And that contributes significantly to United States dollar 135 billion. Can you imagine? This is amazing. We see globally, the world now has about 28% managers at the manager level. Now, previously it was 45% that I mentioned in Fortune 500 at the board level, board of executives, as what we see with Samina, Farida, and now Aida we have here, all of the chiefs in the companies. But now tapping deeper into the managerial position, the middle management position, as long as I know, insofar as I have learned, the world globally has about 28.3% last year in 2000 until 2022, in the span of 2 years, to 2020 up until 2022. So previously in 1991, around 1991, we only knew about 23% of women tapping into the middle management level. So now I'm happy to see this. That means we have some positive incremental and positive trend, right? To see that women can be accepted equally in the business world, and that should be right, because we need more equality. We need to step out from all of those stereotyping that in business everyone can be the player, everyone can jump into the arena. In business, the main point is about the competence. In business, the main point about the wisdom that you have, right? So it's not about the stereotyping. So I can see that with the middle management level, there is a very solid incremental, and also in the executive board, solid incremental, solid contribution. So I have a positive impression on the reduction of inequality in the next 20 years ahead.
That's amazing, and just the stats what you just quoted. Now, I asked Ada this question before. What challenges do women face in the corporate world, particularly when it comes to leading sustainability initiatives? And how, in your view, how can these challenges be overcome?
Oh, yeah, very much. The main challenge comes from mindset, not only from the outer space of the women, I mean, from men, but even from the women itself. I've been working intensively, especially before the pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic. I've been working with nearly about up until today, more or less about 10 million SMEs, most of them run by women. And I've been working with women or female workers. Some of them are very gallant warriors. I admire them very much. Some of them are very wise, but some of them are also trapped into the metric traps that, okay, metric traps that say that, okay, let me just be at home doing nothing. I'll just rely on whatever whatever come to the future. And this should not also be stereotyped, because this can happen to men as well, right? So mindset happens to be the main barrier in the future. Not to mention about stereotyping, I agree, and also domestication, the issue of domestication. One disturbing fact that I have been seeing the fact that some female workers, that they say they are 17, they are enough age limitation to start working already. It's not against the law for them to work, but once they plan for the future, some of them they tend to be, okay, let me stop doing this and stop doing that and being a housewife. I admire that, because a housewife, the good housewife, would be the best teachers, right, for their children, right? I admire that decision as long as the decision is taken equally between the husband and the wife. But the problem comes when a person decides to, okay, I'll just sit back and relax and doing nothing, just take it to whatever the destiny will be. And this will be the main catastrophic barrier coming from the mindset. So I think that one would be the hindrance that we should tackle, right? Nobody should be trapped in that situation, or else they will be trapped into the short-term mindset, short-term metric, right here, right now, doing whatever I can do to eat today, and whatever will be tomorrow will be just that. So for that one, that's not a moment in the next few decades. The point is in business, if in 1970s, Levitt asked you about what business are you in, I can just simply say, oh, my business is in the banking industry. My business is in architecture or anything else. But nowadays, especially in the next 2 decades after COVID-19, if someone asks me what business am I in, I would answer, oh, that would be a deep question. It means that question implies to what kind of solution for which problem in which ecosystem that I want to provide. So I believe women have more wisdom and sensitivity to adapt with this situation, right? So I even have to learn from that, right? Women have to be more creative, right? The creativity will be equal with men. In this instance, I admire people who empower women equally in the sense of not the physical well-being, but in the sense of psychological, in the sense of competence. We should be treated equally. Everyone should have the same chance to be successful in the future.
Amazing. Some really amazing, points made, full of wisdom. Thank you so much, Dr. Rizky. Now, before we turn to Farida, I would just like to say for those listening in, please do send across your questions. We will have time for Q&A session. So please, there's a little box on the side. Please send your questions whilst you're listening to our speakers. Now, I would like Farida to join the stage. I'd like to begin by asking you, now in the Middle East, do you see more multi-generational family businesses integrating ESG principles into their strategy and operations?
Well, first of all, thank you so much to WIEF for inviting me for this session. Thank you, Samina, for the expert moderation. And of course, it's a pleasure to be here with my fellow panelists. I'll just very briefly contextualize my comments for your audience, because obviously I come from a slightly different angle at this question of, what impact does female leadership have on the execution of ESG strategies. Over the last 14 years of my career, I've been running an organization called the Tharawat Family Business Forum, and that means it's a nonprofit research organization that looks at the impact of family-owned businesses, family enterprises on the MENA economy. And the reason why we look at that, and the reason why we think that family enterprises are actually a very important factor, is because the large majority of the private sector globally is family owned. And Dr. Rizky, you were speaking of SMEs. The way I look at the economy is who owns these SMEs, or who owns the private sector. And I did look at Indonesia. And just to give your audience an impression of when we speak of family-owned enterprises, we do speak, for example, in Indonesia, of a market capitalization of around 40%. In the country. And in certain industries, family enterprises really largely outrank any other type of ownership models. So for example, in property real estate, it seems to be 91% market share of family enterprises. This is according to BCG. In agriculture, of course, it's 74%, also very, very high. Energy, still 65%. Consumer goods, 45%. So you can see that when we speak of family enterprises, we're actually speaking of the economy. And that obviously includes all these SMEs that Dr. Rizki was speaking about, because that is really where the bulk of private sector activity lies. So when the question that you asked me is a really interesting one, and I think that in order to understand the width and the importance of this question, let's break down what we're trying to achieve here. We're speaking of ESG, and the reason we're speaking of ESG, I think, and why it has been coming up more and more is because there is a dawning realization that as a global human community, certain academics would say that we're facing a polycrisis. What is a polycrisis? A polycrisis is the convergence of different types of crises that kind of drive it to a certain pinnacle. And I think that the reality that we're facing as humanity is that this polycrisis is, by its own nature, extremely complex. There are certain social elements to it, there are environmental elements to it, there are political elements to it. And now the question that we are actually addressing here with this question of ESG is, in a way, how does the private sector deal with the reality of such a polycrisis? What is its, on the one hand, responsibility, right, as a private sector that has a specific footprint on this planet? What is our responsibility? On the other hand, what we also need to look at is risk mitigation for the private sector. So how does an enterprise mitigate the risks that come with such a polycrisis? And I think that the hope is and was and will probably forever be that principles like ESG or system structure strategies that include ESG characteristics help us address these complexities, because what it actually should mean is that it embeds an enterprise more naturally, more organically into its environment. So what you're asking me is, are family enterprises in our region working on more ESG strategies? It's a complex answer because it's a complex problem. I would like to say that any family-owned enterprise that I have ever met has had an organic instinct for its community. And that means that it has always sensed that because it's multi-generational, right? The moment you pass an enterprise from one generation to the next, you're already outlasting the average lifespan of a company, which I think globally today is about 22 years. So the average company survives for about 22 years. Now, family enterprises, imagine, even if we just pass it to one next generation, have already outlasted. That means they have had already the awareness of how their context works, of how their communities react to them. So I think my theory is that ESG, whilst we term it in a new way, so environmental and social and governance principles have already existed in family enterprises since the beginnings of time, because family enterprises need awareness of their environment. Now, the question now is, are we starting to see a more structured adoption of ESG principles according to global systems, according to global regulation or even local regulation? I would say carefully, the answer is yes, even though I would say that traditional systems are still probably outweighing. So kind of a traditional way for a family enterprise to focus on its community probably outweighs at the moment still the adoption of kind of systems and principles based on a global regulatory framework.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Now, what do you think is the role of family offices as investors to become drivers of ESG across the region?
Well, I mean, I'll keep my comments short because I know that we're running out of time, but that is a whole very, very interesting question in and of itself, right? Does family-owned capital, multi-generational capital, behave differently in the marketplace than other types of capital? And I think that because of what I've just described, and I'm happy to go into this in Q&A perhaps, that there is a different type of behavior. Family-owned capital is allocated in a different way. It's allocated with a different timeline. And this is one very important aspect that I always highlight when we deal with family-owned enterprises and family-owned capital. Very often we see that the timeline of reflection is a very different one, because family-owned entities very often still think in generations rather than in 12 months return on investment. Now, if you think of the polycrisis that I mentioned, if you think of the complexity of problems that we are facing, it is actually very important that on the one hand, we do have fast-moving, short-term oriented capital, but it needs to be balanced out with long-term, strategically allocated capital. And I think this is where family wealth is actually playing a very, very important role, because it does seem a little more patient, perhaps, or a little more future-oriented than other types of capital. This is largely in our region still speculative. We are doing research to better understand this, but I'll leave it here so that you can move to our Q&A if you want, Samina.
Actually, before we go to Q&A, if I may just ask a final question.
Sure.
How has female leadership in the MENA private sector evolved? And do you think this has influenced the adoption of ESG?
So to me, this is really the kind of the pinnacle of the question of today, right? Does female leadership influence the adoption of sorry, I'm just distracted by the poll. So the question is, does female leadership improve the adoption of ESG principles in enterprises? I don't have data about this and from our region. I cannot tell you yes, 50%, no, 40%. I cannot tell you that. Anecdotally, observationally, I think, following on what Aida and Dr. Rizki have said, diverse leadership does seem to improve, does indicate that it does seem to improve the acknowledgement that ESG factors play a role in future-proofing the enterprise, right? So, and I'm speaking diversity on purpose, not just gender diversity, by the way, generational diversity, ethnic diversity. So there are a lot of other factors that play into the role. And the reason, again, coming back just to close the loop to my prior comment on the polycrisis, I think as humans, we are acknowledging that the complexity of the problems that we're facing as local communities, as regional communities, and as international community have achieved a level of complexity where it's just not reasonable to think that one perspective can address all these challenges at the same time. So there is a very logical reasoning that argues in favor of diversity at all different levels, and that if we were to agree with each other that ESG as a principle helps us address these challenges as the private sector, then that would logically lead to a better implementation. We do see some, I would say, proof of that in recent years, but it's going to be very interesting to further observe that and research that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think I could have easily spoken to you for a few more hours, because you've just been, all three of you have given me so much to think about. Now, we have had some amazing questions coming from those listening in. So we've had a question come in from Theo, and Theo's question is, how can companies ensure that women have equal opportunities to contribute to ESG initiatives and maximize business value? Would anyone like to take this question?
I can.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think one of the key elements that organizations should, really do is, as what Dr. Rizki mentioned just now, is a change of mindset, really, that women is actually capable of doing the same things that men can do. So that overall perception that there are certain roles specific to only female, that whole mindset should be eliminated. So that there has to be an exercise, a conscious exercise, conscious effort, conscious activities, conscious movement to change the mindset within an organization that everybody is equal. So that is, to me, the first start of pursuing diversity and inclusion for women in an organization. Without that, it's very difficult. We can, put up a lot of numbers, put out a lot of promises, but for as long as the mindset change of the leaders within the organization does not change, it will not go anywhere.
Thank you so much, Ada. We've had a question come through from Jackie, and Jackie's question is, what are the important traits and qualities of female leaders and that can contribute towards accelerating the sustainability agenda within their organizations? That's a very interesting question. Dr. Rizki, would you be brave enough to take that question? I think you've given us a very good overview on, I guess, I think you already touched upon that, on the qualities women have. But I've always been fascinated by male allies because I think that when men kind of come in, they further aid the kind of female agenda, right? So having powerful voices like you out there is actually really helping, I think, the women's voice. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, good, very good question, brilliant question. May I tail the answer from what Aida just stated? I agree with very much the answer from Theo previously, and then I'll go to this coming question, right? So first of all, I agree. Begins from mindset, and after that, we need to cascade down in the solid management process. Like we begin from KPI, and we begin from we also have some solid and rigid monitoring, and to ensure that there is the fair operating practices along the way in a corporation. So the fairness should be there. The fairness should be preserved, right, in a well balanced way. So governance must be established in this instance, right, strategically. But we can go down and down using all of the procedures, using all of the policies inside of the corporate level, I suppose. And I agree with that. So now to the what sort of traits, right, for female leadership to accelerate. Well, the first one is, I believe, as I already mentioned about wisdom. This is the big picture, Samina. In the post-COVID-19 era, the world will go into finding the new fact that human is the problem of all problems. Human is the main cause of all problems, right? So, but at the same time, I believe that humans should be the main solutions of all of those problems as well, right? So that's why up until today, I still believe that invest in human and humanity would be the fundamental way to preserve the future, to secure the life and to sustain the world well in the long run. Okay, that's the big picture, and so what are the traits that we can get? Say first, for example, the balance between assertiveness and empathy. May I now, in our limited time, may I now focus on this two, and after that we go into perseverance. Okay, so in the wild world after the COVID-19, all ideas will be brilliant. No ideas should be rejected, because the moment is also wild, right? Only wild ideas with wild endeavor to struggle will sustain. That's what I believe. So, it begins from the new out of the box thinking. Okay, we cannot stick in the old times. Yes, we should learn from the past, but we cannot live in the past, right? We need more projection. We need more adaptability. We need more agility, just like bamboo. The bamboo has a very solid root down there on the soil, right? Inside the soil, but it has a very high flexibility, right? I barely hear about the fact that bamboo can be broken under the storm, right? But bamboo lives together. It means it maintains the networking. So this is another trait that we need to we need to expand, make friendship, make networking, provide solid networking. With networking, we divide the burden. But at the same time, we also have to question ourselves. If we were willing to divide the burden, are we also willing to divide the cake? Most people would say no for the second question. Oh no, I don't want to divide the cake. I want the cake to be myself. And this is where right. This is when we also at the same time are lacking of empathy. So we will be living in the new wild world where empathy can be a very bottom line layer, as a very baseline layer from this year, from today up until the foreseeable future. So the empathy will be highly questioned. With empathy, people can lead into the Third World War, which I really hope that I was wrong, right? So, but this can be done, possibly done, yeah, if we lost the empathy. Who can bear this trait? Who can teach this trait? I believe women is the main bridge. That's why I deeply respect women. I deeply respect my mother. I really highly respect my mother, my mother-in-law, and the mother of my children as well, right? Because we rely on this very much. We rely on this trait, on this value very much to keep the world peace. Right. So that's why anybody, as I spoke at the beginning, anybody can be feminine, anybody can be masculine. But what we need is to learn each other. But what we need is the eternal balance, right? And this is what we are lacking for, right? What we are very need to learn more about this. So the last one is the perseverance. All of those mean nothing if we cannot be persevere enough, right? Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and the foreseeable future, it's not about competing with others. It's about competing with ourselves, right? It's about whether we can withstand the storm. It's about whether we can be the winner for ourselves. Who should we defeat? The pastime us, right? And this trait will make a leader to become the true leaders. And of course, on top of it, servant leadership. So if female can be that servant leadership, means if I become a boss, it's so easy to say, hey, you get out of the room right now. That is a boss. But what we need is not a type of a boss like that. What we need is an inspiring leader. Okay, we have the target to be outside the door. Let's go walk together, go out the door, and we will find the new challenges from there. Your burden will be mine. Whatever comes to be your obstacles will be also mine. Tell it to me, and that will be my job to establish everything to run smoothly. Right. So we need that kind of inspiring leader. So I think that's how we can tackle the world, the challenging world in the future. Samina.
Thank you so much. We've had some really interesting questions come in from Chai in Thailand, and I think he's actually sent about 3. But we've only got 5 minutes left, so I might just take one of your questions. How have women's leadership and representation on corporate boards influenced ESG initiatives and outcomes within organizations? Now, that's a brilliant question because we're not really seeing that many women sitting on boards. So anyone would like to take our final question?
I can give it a go. Try.
Thank you, Frida.
Again, well, thank you so much for the question. I think it's exactly the core question to a certain extent of this webinar. And, I think what we've tried to do is kind of establish a framework and a context for the answering of this question. I've seen around the world statistics that show that, again, diversity supports the implementation of ESG strategies. And I think that there is a very clear correlation with that. And of course, gender diversity tops that list, I would say, because it is something that, I would say we sometimes underestimate how young it still is, how recent, I would really say that we probably are the first generation of women who have really thoroughly been integrated into the economic fabric of the world. So in certain places more than in others, but I think it's still quite a recent emergence. And so would I say that the integration of female leadership or the increased existence of female leadership has or will improve ESG related decision making? Absolutely. I think it will perhaps pose questions that traditionally were not posed. One thing that I want to just highlight, and I'd love to hear comments from my colleagues on this, is there is one thing we have to be very careful about, I think, globally, is that because this agenda of kind of gender diversity and ESG keeps kind of being put together, what we have to be very careful about is that ESG is not a female responsibility, right? The fact that as a private sector, we need to act responsibly, we need to act with the knowledge that we have an environmental crisis globally at our hands, right? That we have social demographic shifts that we cannot predict the outcome of. That is not a question of being nice to people, right? That is not a question of adopting a stray cat, right? That is a question of strategic, really hard strategic leadership decision-making. And I think we have to be very careful that we do not genderize these problems and that we do not give them a certain tint. When we're talking about ESG, there is a tendency, and we can term it otherwise as well, but there is a tendency to kind of put it into a certain department, to brush it, into a certain, oh, this is the nice people, they're doing that, and everybody else is doing the real work. We have to be very, very careful that we're not putting ourselves into a situation where we silo those big questions that are going to address the future of our planet and the future of our economies.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's a good note to actually end our discussion on, Farida. It is actually quite tragic, I think, that we have to end here because I've learned so much from all of you guys. I'd like to thank the World Islamic Economic Forum for giving us this opportunity to be here with you today. I'd like to again thank our speakers, Farida, Aida, and Dr. Rizwi. And I'm really excited to see, what initiatives WIEF has coming up in future. I've definitely enjoyed this session so much. And again, I'd like to thank the organization. We run a lot of events at WIEF. It's not always as easy as it looked, but I think they've done a brilliant job in putting such an amazing panel together. So thank you so much. And thank you also for such amazing questions that have been coming through and, everyone listening in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and WIEF for inviting us. Thank you, Samina.
Thank you very much. Great moderation, Samina. Thank you, WIEF. Thank you, Farida, Aida.
Thank you, Farida, Rizki.
Thank
you very much indeed.
Awesome.
So thank you all the participants. Really brilliant questions.
Thank you to our distinguished guests for being here today and making this webinar successful. Now, thank you to all. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. We truly hope that you have gained valuable inputs and ideas. Now, on behalf of WIEF Foundation, thank you for joining us today. Stay safe and have a great day ahead.